Have you ever stepped into somebody else's work because you were afraid of what might happen if you didn't? Well, that's an original sign of micromanagement. And how do we avoid stepping into somebody else's work? Um, as a leader, we have things that need to be done. We have deadlines. We have quality problems. We have client problems. Whatever the the problem is out there, we're speeding up the outcome. We're speeding up what is getting processed. So in that often feels like responsibility. And as we look at that as a leader, it makes it very easy to step in, and we'll call it micromanagement. It's not always micromanagement. Sometimes those things need to be done. But we look at this and we step in and we take over. Uh, and this feels like responsibility, but how does it feel to the person that you're taking over? It slowly can break down the trust. Can make them feel like, well, I'm not good enough to do this job. Um, there's a lot of things that kind of play into these factors. So in this series, this video today, we're gonna dive deep into micromanagement and some of the hidden things that happen from there and some of the hidden costs that go along with it. So, micromanagement teaches capable people to wait for permission. And as you think about that, when we always step in, then they don't know where to go. They freeze up, they stop, they don't waste their time, and so they're always waiting for you to tell them what to do. That's where we want to that's what we want to avoid. We want to stay out of that area. We want them to take ownership. We want them to grow. We want them to do better. But the responsibility side is, as a leader, you have those responsibilities. You have to make sure things get done. So how do we make sure that that responsibility happens and not turn it into micromanagement? So most leaders aren't don't set out to create micromanagement. Um, they're usually out to protect the quality, protect a relationship, protect a deadline, protect a customer, protect the team, whatever. They're out to take that responsibility and do something with it. But the typical behaviors usually end up kind of painting the wrong picture. So, look at, you know, send somebody back and rewrite that, redo this, rewrite that email. We need to dig deeper. If you're constantly, pushing back on that person doing the work and making it sound like you're not happy with this, we got to look at the signals that sends. We also have to look at ourselves as some of the deeper issues. If we're constantly doing this, why are we doing it? Is it a fear of failure? Is it because we don't want to be embarrassed being a leader? Are we uncertain that things are correct? Are we just over trying to hold the accountability in place? These are all things that internally we need to look at when we do these actions. Why are we doing it? And are we doing it for the right reason? But the control, will calm the leader's anxiety, which is normal. If the leader's in control, obviously that anxiety goes down. And when the leader's not, then it's like, well, I'm worried it's not going to get done, and we kind of go through that way. But we have to look at these kind of factors. Micromanagement is often an emotional regulation problem disguised as performance. That's a it's a key takeaway as we look at this. Is it's easy to create micromanagement because we look at it as performance, responsibility, accountability, and we can justify why we have micromanagement in our businesses today. So, what are some of the hidden costs? You know, ownership means that the outcome matters. And in this, you know, we have to work with the associate that we've delegated something to and get them to understand the outcome matters. And if we're not teaching and getting to that point, that's on us as leaders. The outcome is important, and that's where clarity comes in. If we want that person you've delegated to get the job done and get it done right, we need to be clear about why it matters. Um, People need space also to learn and grow. There's trade offs. Um, as a leader, you may go in and be very distinct that, hey, I don't like how this is being done, and you're being, I'll call it nitpicky about how it's happening, but look at the outcome. Are you being nitpicky about the steps, but the outcome is actually still the same? Look, every person does things differently. And so somebody may find another way to get to that same result about what matters. Uh, we don't need to review every choice. We don't need to look and revise everything. We need to be accepting as long as things are correct and in the right format that we need them in. So let's not get hung up on being too critical about um, the steps that somebody may be doing. Visibility is part of it. Is we need to see what's happening. We need that visibility in there, and then to make sure that that person has ownership in it. So a lot of times employees, they learn to wait, and the reason they learn to wait is because they're always getting questioned as they move forward on their own. So they're always just waiting for somebody to tell them exactly what to do. This can change over time as they gain that independence. Then they'll slowly grow as long as we let them do that. But if we always micromanage and we always question everything they're doing, that's never going to happen. So that extra scrutiny that sometimes we put on things, we have to be careful. Uh, I know at a point in my life, I remember just working with a person at one of our counters, and he was struggling doing a basic math equation in how we do things in our business, and I really come down on him. And later, I had somebody kind of overheard the conversation, and they asked me, "Well, how long have you been doing this math calculation?" And I said, 10 years. And this guy's been working for us for 2 months, and you expect him to be as good at it as you are 10 years later. And that kind of sunk in with me a little bit of how sometimes our expectations of who we are, we impose those on the new people that are coming in, and we have to understand that it took time for us to learn and grow. We have to allow them time. Um, we have to have safer responses when we bring things up. We have to slow down, ask questions. Don't quickly just jump in and criticize something. Ask why. Why did you do it this way? What's your reasoning? And they actually may have a better idea than you. I think too often, as leaders, we get stuck in this idea that we're the only ones that know anything, and that's definitely not the case. As we have people come up, you'll find that there's a lot of people that know an awful lot if you allow them to speak. Um, so as we go into some of these, asking the right decisions and working with people is probably one of the best things that we can do as we're training and trying to avoid micromanaging. Is it's so much calmer and easier to say, okay, you've got the report done. I see it looks good. Hey, I've got a few questions, but I'd kind of like to know how you arrived at where you arrived. What's your steps? How did you do things? And that gives them a time to shine and explain how they did things. And you have to evaluate, is there enough in there that I need to criticize? Is there enough that I need to change? Or is it all good? Can we just move on and we, as a leader, we accept that and everything's fine? Um, what kind of things can, and again, another question is what kind of things can I help you with to maybe speed this process up or help you understand it better, and allow them to ask questions. Um, but if every attempt at judgment is correct, people stop practicing judgment. And, you know, we have to look at, we shouldn't look at things as judgment. How do we grow? How do we help people grow? How do we help them understand, the full concept of what they're trying to do, and so on, and I think these are huge pieces in the puzzle of, again, we want to avoid that micromanagement. I know in a couple of my last videos I talk about, overtrust, and you have overtrust where, hey, you hand people work and you don't ever check them, you just 100% trust that they're going to get it done, and there's no accountability. It's just, that's overtrusting. Then when you don't trust anybody, you micromanage because you're constantly looking and digging into things, and and that is micromanagement. And in the middle of that is true delegation and teaching delegation and how we do it. So, some of the things that we look at is, you know, if if we can't trust somebody, then, our jobs are always a lot harder. So sometimes we have to cycle back our expectations a little bit. Not saying that we don't hold people accountable, not saying that there's a responsibility factor in there, but we may have many, many years on the job, and may have a different expectation. So we have to pull that back. Um, but over the years, I've worked with a lot of younger, newer managers coming in, and micromanagement is definitely one of the quickest things that they tend to fall back on. And a lot of that is, you know, a comfort level. And say you were a task driven individual in your past job, and you got things done, you were good at it, you got promoted because you were good at what you did. Well, you step into a leadership role, and you need to slowly step away from becoming the doer and more of the leader. And if we're always the doer, then we're typically falling into that micromanagement role. But we have to set the scenes right. We have to get the new managers as they're coming in to understand they've got to hand these things off. We have to build some trust. And again, I'm not saying blind trust. It needs to be built, and there's processes to do that. But I've seen where managers don't trust anybody. In fact, I was on a call the other day that somebody said, I don't trust my people to do it right. That's why I do it. Okay? That's my opinion. That's a leadership problem. If you don't trust any of your people and you do everything, well, then you haven't done a very good job of training and building that trust with your people. So again, I've seen this over the years, and it's easy to fall into. Um, I mentioned this in one of my last videos about working with teenagers, and very much the same thing is we have teenagers, and our goal as parents is to teach and help them grow so that when they become young adults that they know the things they need to know, and can live on their own, do those things. And if we don't trust our teenagers, that's one of the first problems that we have. And if we're not patient enough and we just always jump in and do it because it's easier, how are they ever going to learn? So there's this process of that delegating and not falling into micromanaging. Um, so one little story I have is I had a manager that he always talked about how busy he was. He didn't have time to do this or that, and it kind of kept asking him, well, why don't you have your team helping you? Well, as we kind of dug in and got working more and more together, I really noticed that his team was extremely weak, and um, it wasn't that he wasn't trying, but he gave people things and they didn't do a very good job, and his expectations were somewhat high, and he ended up becoming the doer again, and he quickly fell into it. But it wasn't that he wasn't trying to make it work. He had some people on the team that shouldn't have been the leadership of the location. And so over time, we made some changes. We revised some things. We got some people in the right seats and helped him be able to hand some of that work off. And over time, I slowly saw that micromanagement fade away. But he didn't have the trust. And he needed to build that trust before he could get out of that micromanagement spot he was in. Failure sometimes is some of the things that happens to people of, you know, if I do it myself, I know things will get done right. I don't want to fail. And as I brought up the teenagers, sometimes we need to let them fail. Sometimes people don't learn until they've made a mistake, and sometimes, you know, as I remember with my teenagers, you know, different generations have different ideas of how things work, and it's like, well, Dad, why can't I do it this way? And you say, well, maybe it can, maybe it can, but this is what I think, and you kind of have to play that back and forth. But overall, you know, there are times when you have to let somebody fail. So, what are some of the long term, costs that go along with this? Operational cost is one we look at, and if you look at the managers doing all the work and you have somebody hired over here that should be doing the work but they can't do it and you're not doing anything about it, then you got an employee right there that's costing the company money and not doing their job. So you also have things like, a lot more meetings because things aren't going right, projects that fail because, things aren't happening, decisions that just keep kind of recycling and coming back up, people waiting for things to get done, and then the human cost. And you may ask, what's the human cost? Well, the human cost is frustrated employees walk out the door. And so, these things happen when micromanagement's in the culture. Engagements drop when people no longer feel trusted. Creativity shrinks when ideas aren't used. Confidence fades when judgment is repeatedly second guessed. Honesty weakens when people bring what the leader wants to hear rather than what should come out. Some leave, some stay, but for the most part, we have a problem with the culture, and if we can't control the micromanagement side of things, the culture tends to fall apart. Um, the whole system becomes less honest, less adaptable, and then more on a dependent role. And dependency usually falls back to the leader getting things done. So what we need to do is we need to replace that control with more coaching. And it goes back to what I said earlier. What questions do we ask? How do we help them move forward? We don't just simply step back and totally let them fail. we coach and we help along the way. That is really kind of the function that we should be looking at, is the coaching level, getting the people to doing the job right the first time. And if we can get this done, the leader, the manager's anxiety can usually soften. They can step away and feel like things are going to be taken care of. Um, Better replacement in coaching, meaning as we have new people come in, how do we prep them better than maybe we did the last person that came in? Not being absent and getting the people up to speed quicker. Coaching just holds a different standard. It's not a judgment. It's helping. It's coaching. It's getting them to the level they need to. So some of the useful questions that I believe are great when you're coaching is uh, when somebody comes to you and they have a problem, or you've micromanaged and you're already in their problem, you ask, what decision do you think's best? Let them give you feedback. And then you may say, okay, yeah, I can see you've thought through part of this, but what about this? What about this? You keep digging that decision in without prescribing and giving them the answer. What risks are you seeing in this decision? What risks are you seeing if you don't get this work done? Um, Ask them, where do you need my input, rather than just providing your input? What support would I help you with to help you move this forward? And what would success look like if that was a checkpoint? So there's easy ways to bring things up and not just be critical. And I think that's the point of all of this, is micromanagement often turns into the critical side. Uh, Jumping in the middle without getting all the details, not asking the proper questions. It's just jumping in the middle and demanding change, or taking it away and doing it yourself. So here's where we develop the employee's judgment. And how do you do that? Again, you teach them how to make the decisions that you would make. And that's where the judgment comes in, is, you know, as a leader, we make judgment calls every day, and it's something that becomes very common, and we get used to it. But as new people are growing, they need somebody to teach them how to make those decisions. Um, Here's 5 practices that can create independence. So look at the decision rights of what decisions can they make. Where should they consult, and what requires approval? Right there, you've got a branch in the road, and you can say, hey, you make these decisions, you're good. Hey, if you run across this, maybe just quickly ask me something, shoot me an email, whatever, but just consult. Hey, this one, I'll probably have to go to my boss, so you better bring it to me. It needs approval. Create those checkpoints, those decision rights, if you want to call them that, and then agree on these. Agree that, you're willing to let them make some of the decisions. And now, over time, some of that consulting may eventually move into the bucket of letting them make the decision. Some of those approvals may eventually end up in just the consulting side. So, working through these and helping them have some guide rails, some guardrails in working on this, but um, don't automatically go down the wrong road. Meaning, when somebody did something, don't just assume it's wrong. We need to pay attention and ask questions. Don't just jump in and go, "You did this wrong." It's really our tone, our approach, how we work with people and teach and grow. Um, Ask questions, pause, name the risk. If there's a risk where they're headed, let them know that, but trust and verify. I'm sure you've heard that in the world of business. Trust but verify. And then I like to add trust and verify, but then coach through the process, because that coaching then builds more, and helps things grow. So um, intentional independence is what we're looking for. So so the opposite of micromanagement is not neglect. The opposite of micromanagement is, like I said, it's more trust. And in order for us to trust, we need to allow that individual to have some independence and make some of their own decisions, allow for some failures, and don't always criticize. So strong leaders clarify the outcome, teach the decision making process, and create a psychological safety net. Now, what does that mean? How do we create that psychological safety net? It's trust. When that employee knows that they have trust, they know the leaders behind them, psychologically in their head, they know I'm allowed to fail. I'm allowed to go back, and apologize. I'm allowed to catch myself. But if that person knows they're going to get yelled at, knows they're going to get written up, knows that they may get fired, that safety net's gone. And they're going to be less apt to bring things to you and talk to you. So offer support without taking over, hold standards. That's part of our responsibility. We still have to have the accountability and responsibility to hold the standards and make sure things are right. Make sure that our control becomes coaching, not overbearing or powerful, degrading, um, you know, and speak up sooner. Don't allow things to just continue on if you know something's happening. But leadership success depends on the success of the other people. So think about that. How do I get that person moving on? How do I get them going well? Building the team accomplishment is key factor here, and you have to do that one individual at a time. So we have to create the conditions where people can step forward. And in closing here, really want to just recap that we need to notice fear. And are we bringing fear to the table? Are we being hard on somebody? There are absolutely ways to have hard conversations and be to the point and not impose fear. There's coaching, teaching. We need to get them to take ownership, and we need to coach through the things that they're struggling with. We need to have clear checkpoints, and we need to clarify and make sure that they understand what they're doing, and we trust and verify. And, so where does the urge to micromanaging show up the most? Typically, it's quality. Somebody's not doing the job well enough or up to the leader's standards. Next is deadlines, when somebody asks for something and you're panicked that it's not going to be done. Or if there's a risk of going off the rails and going the wrong direction, that typically plays into it. And probably the last one falls more on the leader of just not having confidence in somebody else. Like I mentioned in a meeting recently, when they said, I don't trust any of my team to do it right, that's why I do it myself. There's no confidence there. Well, if there's no confidence, whose fault is that? Is it that I have a whole group of incompetent people, or have I not trained them? We have to look at ourselves in that question. So I would encourage you to invite feedback as you work through these scenarios and working with people. Feedback often helps you as a leader know whether you're doing what you should be. Um, Also, if you like what you hear in my videos, I also have a lot of these same articles on my blog in type. But if you like these, follow me here. Also look at thegenuinementor.com. It's my website. I have some training material out there. I have my blog posts, but follow me here on YouTube, and every week I have a new a new piece of the series. Every month I have a series. Every week, I have a piece of that series, and this series just kind of falls back on delegating and micromanaging and trusting and so on. So reducing micromanagement is not only about stepping back, it's about creating the conditions where people can step forward. Keep that in mind, and I hope you all have a great day. Thank you.